For the past 6 months, my relationship with my wife has changed dramatically. She has grown distant, and we haven't had any intimacy during that time. I began to notice that she seemed increasingly uninterested in me, and I found myself in a state of confusion and concern about what was happening in our marriage. My wife, who is 31 years old, has been calling her ex-boyfriend, and it has come to a point where I feel I need to take serious action. I never expected to reach this point, but I installed recorders in our home to get clarity on the situation. I have been lurking on this forum for about 6 months now, absorbing stories and experiences of others, but I can no longer hold back and must seek advice regarding my own predicament. I am 35 years old, and we have 2 young boys, aged 3 and 1.5. Our family life has become more complicated, especially as we are currently in the process of building a new house. This should be an exciting time, yet it feels overshadowed by the growing issues in my marriage. I am not the type of person who enjoys conflict or allows things to fester without resolution. When I first noticed a change in my wife's behavior, I took the initiative to have a heartfelt conversation with her. I needed to understand why she had pulled away from me in so many ways. I asked her why she no longer wanted to talk, hug, or kiss me, and why she had become uncomfortable with even the simplest forms of physical affection. I also brought up the lack of intimacy between us. Initially, she was reluctant to engage in this conversation. It took a great deal of effort to break through the emotional barrier, but she eventually opened up about her feelings. What I discovered during our discussion was quite shocking. She expressed to me that she feels I am insufficient and that she has taken on the majority of responsibilities in our household. She stated that she feels she cannot rely on me and that she is the one making decisions and managing the care of our children. Her words were painful to hear, and she even mentioned that she would be better off on her own. Although I am generally more reserved and introverted, this response struck a chord with me. I listened to her, accepted her viewpoint, and expressed my commitment to improve myself and alleviate the stress she was feeling. I love her deeply and wanted to avoid conflict at all costs. However, I could not shake the feeling of frustration and confusion that her words left me with. I believe there are many aspects of her claims that do not accurately reflect my efforts as a husband and father. I spend around 8 to 9 hours a day working, and when I return home, I am fully dedicated to caring for our boys. I play with them, feed them, take the elder child to swimming lessons, and read them bedtime stories. Even during the night, I wake up whenever necessary to help with the children. In addition to parenting, I also contribute to our home. I handle the dishes, grocery shopping, and light cleaning. While she may prefer to clean because she thinks I am not efficient at it, I still do my part to relieve her burden. I take care of the car and manage the details associated with our new house as well. I try my best to make her life easier, especially with the challenges that come with raising 2 young boys. I recognize that being a parent to 2 small children is demanding, but I am not the type of person who is constantly active or seeking out new tasks. Some people feel the need to always be busy, considering what needs to be done next, or what projects to start. My father-in-law is like that, and while I admire his work ethic, I am different. Once the day is over, the children are asleep, and all chores are completed, I enjoy unwinding with a movie or playing video games to relax. I accept who I am, and I know that I am good at my job, but starting my own business is not something I aspire to do. I do not have grand ambitions for wealth or a lavish lifestyle. I simply wanted a happy, healthy family and to earn a reasonable living. However, I began to realize that my wife's dissatisfaction with our life may be growing, despite what had previously seemed like a solid and loving marriage of 4 years, following 5 happy years together before that. Our initial conversation took place in December, and since then, I have made a concerted effort to be more proactive. I have tried to take on additional responsibilities around the house, such as doing extra grocery shopping and tackling repairs, refusing to rest on my laurels in the evenings. While she appreciated these changes, it did not alter her overall attitude toward me, which prompted me to initiate a second discussion. Based on her treatment of me, I began the conversation by asking if she wanted to save our marriage. Her response of, "I don't know," was tough to hear. To further address our situation, I suggested marriage counseling, and again, her reply was, "I don't know." Recognizing the seriousness of our circumstances, I emphasized that we needed to make decisions for the sake of our children. This seemed to resonate with her, and eventually, she agreed to consider therapy. Consequently, I took charge of finding a suitable therapist for us. Finding a therapist became an essential step for me, especially after the conversation we had that revealed some painful truths about our marriage. During that talk, my wife shared that she married me primarily to impress her parents and her married sisters, with the intention of creating a big, happy family and raising beautiful children together. She admitted that her marriage to me stemmed from enchantment rather than genuine love. To make matters more complicated, I discovered she had previously met with a fellow priest to discuss the state of our marriage. Despite this troubling backdrop, I successfully found a therapist who could help us navigate our issues. We are now approaching our third counseling session, and through our discussions, we have uncovered that we have differing love languages. I crave physical touch, while she leans more towards actions like chores and tasks. However, since we started counseling, physical affection has been absent. I have not received any hugs, and after 2 sessions, I inquired about how she felt regarding our progress. Her response was disheartening. She expressed discomfort in having to share personal details of our lives with someone she considers a stranger. Upon learning that we have not shared a bedroom for 6 months, the therapist was taken aback. My wife explained that she has been co-sleeping with our children, which left no room for me. The therapist reacted strongly, suggesting this was a poor example for our kids, advocating that if space is an issue, we should purchase a separate bed. Taking her advice to heart, I went to IKEA, bought a single bed, and assembled it. Now, I sleep in that single bed next to her, yet I still feel a profound sense of loneliness in our bed arrangement. She stays far to the left, the children are in the middle, and I am left alone on the far right. As the situation has progressed, my wife's narrative has shifted slightly. She has begun to say that she feels depressed from spending so much time at home with the kids. She rationalized her earlier comments about our marriage by saying they came from a place of heightened emotion. Despite the pain her words caused, I found myself believing her. Recently, she returned to work and we hired a nanny, which brought about a minor improvement in our communication. However, it is glaringly obvious that our relationship has diminished to one of mere friendship. I am her husband, yet it does not feel that way at all. There are no signs of improvement in our situation, and she seems indifferent about continuing with our marriage counseling sessions. I find myself scheduling them on my own, while she has made it clear that she does not feel the need for them and participates only because I want it. This dynamic has left me feeling like an abuser, particularly in our intimate life. Historically, she never expressed a strong desire for physical intimacy. We had a routine of being intimate once a week, which I considered acceptable. However, this year has been drastically different, with only 2 instances of intimacy occurring. One instance was a pity act on my birthday, and the other happened post-counseling, where she lay passively while I initiated intimacy, seemingly waiting for me to finish. This left me disheartened and disinterested in pursuing intimacy any further. When I bring up these issues, her response is often dismissive, stating that if I am unhappy with how things are, I should simply leave. An unsettling incident recently occurred that intensified my concerns. My wife attempted to call her ex-boyfriend 4 times in a row late at night, around 10 p.m. I discovered this through a shared app on our phones, which logs incoming and outgoing calls. Naturally, this raised alarm bells for me. I felt compelled to check her messages on her laptop. Although it felt wrong to invade her privacy, the situation felt justified given the circumstances of our relationship. After attempting to contact him, she wrote a message indicating her intention to keep calling until he responded as a normal person would. When I confronted her about it, she initially denied trying to reach him, but when I showed her the call log, she had no choice but to admit the truth. When I inquired about her motive, she explained that she was simply returning a call, knowing that he had also reached out to her previously. I pressed her on whether she had sent any messages after the calls, and she denied it. However, when confronted with the message she had sent, she claimed that he had gotten drunk and attempted to contact her. This entire situation left me feeling even more uncertain about the sincerity of our relationship and where we stand. He got drunk one night and called her, starting to ramble on about some nonsense. When she heard what he was saying, she got angry and told him to leave her alone before hanging up the phone. Afterward, a feeling of guilt washed over her. She tried to call him back 4 times, but he didn't answer. Eventually, she ended up sending him a message, but he never got back to her. This whole situation left her feeling confused and unsure about what to think. This incident occurred around the same time she started pulling away from me. From her point of view, she believes that it's not strange or wrong that she kept this from me. To her, it simply isn't important. However, she feels that any kind of contact with an ex is a bad sign, and for me, it's completely unacceptable. I started to wonder if she might be cheating on me. For the past 6 months, there has been a noticeable distance between us, and this is when those phone calls took place. An update on the situation reveals that many people have shared their thoughts and opinions with me. At first, I was shocked by how many believe that she is indeed unfaithful. The idea seemed so strange to me, almost like something out of a movie. I never imagined that my wife could stoop to that level. However, today everything shifted in my mind. I have come to accept the harsh reality of the situation. I feel foolish to be just another person going through this, but I guess this is how life unfolds sometimes. I had initially promised myself that I would reach out to her ex and talk to her family about my concerns. But I made the decision to take a step back and remain calm. It's hard to believe how easy it was to do this. All I had to do was install a voice-activated recorder in our car. It wasn't even a GPS tracker. The recorder was in place for just 3 days. She used the car to commute to work, then went to a workout, and during that time, she called him, or perhaps he called her, I'm not entirely sure. Regardless, I was able to listen to everything they said during their conversation, which took place over the phone. I was shocked to hear how they talked about their lives, their old jokes, and the same chemistry that my wife and I had when we first met nearly 9 years ago. They were discussing vacation plans, and she mentioned wanting to visit him this coming July. Even more troubling was her telling him that she was giving him a 2-year time frame to move back to our country. I can't wrap my head around this. After listening to an hour-long recording filled with this distressing conversation, I feel overwhelmed. I have several things to process, including planning a meeting with an attorney next week. I want to express my gratitude to everyone who shared their insights. If it hadn't been for your advice, I would never have thought to buy that voice recorder. To think that I hesitated to place it in the car now seems trivial. I need to take a moment to collect my thoughts, especially for the sake of my children. This whole mess seems to have started back in September of last year, and it took me a couple of months to notice significant changes in her behavior. Next week, I will be taking care of my elderly father in another city, which means my wife won't be going to her job. Instead, she'll be using my home office. This raises concerns because it opens up the possibility that she will talk to him while I'm away. Should I place the recorder in the office as well next week? In another update, it's important to note that the affair began last September, which puts me out of the picture for quite some time. Lately, my wife has been avoiding spending time with me in our apartment. She constantly finds excuses to be busy or to go visit her parents, friends, or even just retreats to her bed after we put our kids to sleep. The recordings provide a disturbing insight into her feelings. She professes her love for him, expresses a desire to visit him, and admits to wanting to have a sexual relationship with him. They speak at length about their lives, and she even mentions wanting to go on vacation with him. Alarmingly, she talks about how she plans to leave me soon and even discusses intimate details regarding their relationship. It seems that no one in her family or among her friends realizes the extent of what is happening. They simply think we are going through a temporary rough patch. She comes from a family of 3 sisters and attends church every Sunday, yet here we are, living in a small town with about 20,000 residents. Recently, we even built a house together, but it remains unfinished. I can feel that her patience with our situation is waning. She seems to be suffering in the apartment with me. Her body language speaks volumes, as does her complete lack of communication. It's apparent she wants me out of the picture soon, so there might be a gap before she moves on with the other person. In the next couple of years, the AU pair will be moving to the small town where my wife and our 2 young boys live. They've talked about it, and she has given him 2 years to return to our country. People around us are going to understand that she feels it's important for her children to have a father figure in their lives, so they won't complain about the AU pair being there. It's worth noting that the AU pair is her first boyfriend. They were together for 7 years before she married me, and now we have been together for 9 years. Currently, the AU pair lives abroad but makes frequent visits back to our country. I refuse to be used in this situation. To protect myself and my interests, I have hired an attorney, and we will be meeting soon to discuss the legal steps I need to take. I have evidence that could significantly damage her reputation, and I am contemplating whether to use bits of the recording I have to show others. I seek advice on what actions to take once she serves me divorce papers. My attorney has informed me that preparing my response will take about a month. I could have never anticipated facing such a difficult situation. After my meeting with the attorney, I learned some crucial information that changed my perspective. It became clear that going down the path of retaliating against her might not be the smartest move. I have to consider that we share children and will need to co-parent for the next 15 to 16 years, which complicates matters. Additionally, I have a great deal of respect for her family, and I would prefer not to drag them into our divorce as witnesses. Furthermore, the chances of me getting custody of the kids are slim because they are very young, and they will likely be staying with their mother in her new small town, located just an hour away from the city where I live. This situation means I would only be able to see them every other weekend. I also wouldn't have the ability to sell our house, as the kids need a stable and good living environment. The place they currently live in is temporary and belongs to her father, and I know that this arrangement is not ideal. After our discussion, my attorney sent her divorce papers, which were scheduled to arrive right after Easter, a holiday that lasts 2 days in Poland. It was a Sunday and Monday when everything unraveled. During this time, I kept my emotions in check as best as I could, even using alcohol to help mask my feelings. The day after the papers were sent, I took a day off work to care for my 1-year-old son while she headed to her job in the capital city. While she was gone, my brother helped me gather all of my belongings from the apartment and load them into his car. On the same day, the postman delivered the divorce papers, which turned out to be an invitation for mediation, suggesting that we divide our assets amicably and civilly. The papers pointed out that she is currently in a relationship with the AU pair, and this is why the divorce is taking place. My evidence will serve as a strong point when it comes to discussing child support and custody arrangements. When she returned home, I confronted her, stating that I was fully aware of everything that had been happening and that I had undeniable proof. I expressed how deeply hurt I was by her actions and informed her that she needed to reach out to my lawyer. I handed her the divorce papers and left to visit her parents. Naturally, she was curious about what I knew and how I found out, but she denied everything. Her parents were shocked but ultimately believed my side of the story. I recorded our discussion, as my attorney advised me to do. I started by asking her parents if they thought I was a good husband and father, and they agreed. This meant she could not use them as witnesses against me later in court. They acknowledged the terrible situation and understood the impact her actions had on all of us, especially our kids. After thanking them for their understanding, I made my way to the capital city. In the meantime, I called a friend who helped spread the news of the situation to her friends. Just 2 hours later, my brother-in-law called to inform me that she had admitted to cheating on me with the AU pair, though she stopped short of saying that she had been physically intimate with him. He reassured me that everyone was on my side and that she had severely damaged our family. He also mentioned that her sister had visited her to express just how wrong her actions were. Interestingly, my brother-in-law shared his own story about cheating on his wife and how she had forgiven him, and they were now happy together. Later, her father called me as well, taking full responsibility for her actions, saying that she needed to recognize the damage she had done. He promised that the AU pair would never be welcomed into their home again and that he would stop providing financial support to her. He even attempted to call the AU pair, but there was no answer. Thus, it became increasingly clear that the fallout from her decisions had reached far beyond just our immediate family. He expressed his strong belief that the relationship can be salvaged. In response, her other sister reached out to me via text, offering her full support while also echoing the sentiment that the relationship can indeed be saved. This notion is deeply frustrating to me because I am convinced it cannot be saved. I have a firm belief in my stance and worry that they will hold on to the absence of any intimate video evidence involving me and my ex, using that as a reason for why I should not leave her. I possess recordings where she made comments about our time together, such as urging me to ensure that I would last longer than 3 seconds when she planned to visit me in Holland. She had also made a remark that prompted me to contemplate how her father's behavior might reflect on her own. I even suggested to her that we could confront this woman together to compare notes about their physical attributes, a notion I found both humorous and troubling. There were even moments where she professed her love for me, saying she intended to leave her husband, adding in a light-hearted tone that she wanted to record herself showcasing her favorite intimate position, which she humorously referred to as crappy style, with her back straight. She painted a picture of our life together, giving me a timeline of 2 years to move back. All this while, I felt a lack of emotional connection from her for the past 7 months. Ultimately, she revealed to me right after our confrontation that she had never stopped loving him, which to me was a strong indication of her true feelings. At this moment, like many others have noted, she is seemingly trying to come back into my life after facing confrontation from her family. Her messages have been a mixture of regret and longing, as she expresses her inability to envision a future without me and apologizes profusely for everything she has done. She claimed she was waiting for my return, along with the kids, and insisted that she did not mean to say that she had always loved him. This has left me feeling as though my decision to file for divorce was rash, primarily because I lack concrete evidence of her infidelity. They seem to think that my reasons for leaving her hold less weight without this tangible proof. I also find their belief in her innocence hard to swallow, particularly since he resides in Holland and could very well have visited her. There have been updates and discussions surrounding my decision to serve her divorce papers. Many have suggested that her behavior would change, that she would begin to seek me out to preserve her image with her family and to get my support since she needs help with our 2 young boys. This has indeed occurred. She started messaging me, albeit infrequently, repeating the same lines about how she cannot imagine life without me, professing her love, and sending pictures of our children with messages that profess her love and longing. It has now been 5 weeks since I last heard from her directly, as she has not called me nor attempted to visit. There were numerous opportunities for her to reach out, especially when she passed by my parents' house where I am currently staying. Instead, all I received were sporadic messages and a couple of awkward exchanges when we met to exchange the kids. Her demeanor was cold, with no apologies or attempts to re-establish any emotional connection. On the other hand, her family has noticeably increased their communication with me. Her father has called a couple of times, and her mother has sent me several texts which included links to Christian resources that discuss forgiveness. One of her sisters expressed sorrow over the situation, attributing her behavior to being influenced by some evil spirit. In contrast, the other sister lamented how my wife's actions have damaged our family and conveyed that she does not expect me to return to her. Moreover, my brother-in-law came over and took me out for a beer, which was more of a casual conversation than an attempt to persuade me to go back to her, though he would like that outcome. The dialogues I have had with them reflect a shared disbelief over her actions, and while they expressed a desire for reconciliation, they also communicated an understanding if I chose not to return. Eventually, the day came when I resolved to stick to my decision. My lawyer informed her legal representative of my choice not to forgive her and my desire to proceed with the divorce. He outlined my terms, and now we are simply awaiting a response from her lawyer. However, in the interim, her sister has turned against me, outright blaming me for the destruction of the marriage and stating clearly that my actions will result in the end of our relationship. She made it abundantly clear that my wife was the one who set everything in motion by acting out of selfishness. However, today, my wife is filled with remorse. She is crying and wishing that she could go back in time to change her choices. Now, it feels like the tables have turned, and I am the selfish one. By deciding to divorce her, I am heading toward destroying our marriage. The weight of this decision rests on my shoulders. It's within my power to stop the divorce and return to my children. I don't need to go back to my wife, all I want is to be there for my 2 boys. She expressed to me how my anger has consumed me and warned that it would only worsen if I didn't find a way through it. She urged me to work through my feelings and continue living with my wife. In her eyes, the divorce feels like my way of seeking revenge on my wife, but she pointed out that such actions would also hurt our children. Despite her explanations, I find it difficult to fully grasp the implications. I had anticipated changes in the family dynamics, including how her family might turn against me, but experiencing it firsthand was still jarring. Recently, I felt a wave of guilt wash over me, convincing myself that I was to blame for everything. I recalled the way my wife treated me poorly for over 6 months, both physically and emotionally abandoning me. Her desire to leave me felt like a betrayal. The pressure from her family has been overwhelming. They firmly believe that I am the one abandoning our children. I've considered countering this narrative by presenting my own terms for reconciliation, even though I doubt my wife would agree to them. My feelings for her have diminished significantly, but my love for our children remains strong. If I were to reconsider our relationship, it would have to be on my terms, focusing solely on co-parenting. I envision a partnership without any emotional ties, separate finances, and significant changes to our living situation. My wife would have to relocate with our kids to the capital city where I currently live. I'd want her to be constantly tracked, ensuring she wouldn't stray from her responsibilities. After spending 7 months dating various women, it's possible I might be tempted to cheat during this partnership, and I wouldn't feel the need to disclose it to her. If she ever found out, it wouldn't matter since we wouldn't be married anymore. This idea is mostly a passing thought rather than a firm plan, but I feel cornered with no other options to silence my family's accusations about abandoning our kids in Poland. In Europe, it's customary for young children to remain close to their mothers during a divorce. This creates a challenge for me since my wife lives in a small town, an hour away from my new place. Our children have their schools there, making shared custody difficult. I would likely be relegated to being a weekend dad with sporadic access to them, which adds to my sadness and frustration. It's now been 2 months since I confronted my wife, handed her the divorce papers, and relocated to the capital. Currently, I reside with my elderly parents, sleeping on their couch. Their dining area has turned into my workspace, cluttered with my belongings. My daily routine consists of working from home for 8 hours, then helping my parents, who are 88 and 71 years old, with daily tasks. I also do grocery shopping and take them to doctor appointments. To cope with the stress and sadness, I try to escape through activities like going to the gym or watching movies. I see my children every weekend when my wife brings them to me, and those days are filled with joy. Being with them brings me genuine happiness. I've also confirmed through a paternity test that they are indeed my biological children, which eliminates any uncertainty on that front. However, the situation with the divorce is still complicated. Living with my parents as a grown man and father of 2 leaves me feeling uneasy and lost. I want a larger sum of money from my wife, especially since she is taking over the mortgage on the house we shared. While she has agreed to take on the mortgage, her offer is only 1/3 of what I believe I deserve. This amount does not reflect what I invested in the house. I didn't instigate this situation, yet I am the one facing consequences. I need a stable place to live, and the 1/3 she proposed will not help me secure a new home. Thus, the discussions between our lawyers continue, with her offering me a minimal amount, likely an attempt to keep her finances secure while I'm left trying to piece together my future. The reason she is offering me such a small amount is that she wants to keep the house. However, during our last conversation, I discovered that she might actually be forced to sell it. This situation shows that she should have taken action sooner instead of trying to hold onto it tightly. It's clear that she won't be able to handle the mortgage payments while also paying me, so it will be interesting to see how everything unfolds. There are also other financial issues at play, like child support, which she wants too much for. That also has to be agreed upon. On top of all that, she insists that I should be the one to pick up the kids from the small town where she lives and then drive them back at the end of the weekend. That's a lot of time and fuel. It makes more sense for her to drop them off and for me to drive them back. It's clear that she should be taking responsibility for this, but instead, she seems more focused on arguing about the divorce terms. Recently, my wife's sister invited me to her daughter's communion, which took place last Sunday. I decided to go so I could spend some extra time with my boys. Everyone in the family knows that my decision to divorce is final, so they didn't even try to convince me otherwise. My focus was on taking care of my boys while all the adults were busy enjoying drinks and food at the table after the ceremony. However, during the gathering, my wife approached me and asked if my decision was really set in stone. I looked at her and answered as calmly as possible that yes, it is final and nothing will change that. I am there for my boys, wanting to spend as much time with them as I can. She then expressed how deeply remorseful she feels and how much she regrets her actions. She told me that she ended the relationship with the other person and even went to an exorcist to confess everything about the affair, leaving it all in God's hands. To that, I replied that I really didn't care about what her priest thought. I told her that if there's anyone she should be needing to admit everything to, it's me. At that moment, it almost felt laughable, but I continued. I told her, okay, if you are genuinely remorseful, then I am giving you one chance to tell me the whole truth. Tell me how many times you were with him. She denied it. Then I reminded her of a party she had with her work friends back in November and questioned why she rented an Airbnb for one night instead of staying at one of her friends' places. After I brought that up, she seemed to go blank, unable to come up with anything to say except for asking why I felt the need to keep torturing myself by discussing it. I explained that if she really felt regret, she wouldn't continue to lie to me 2 months after I left. I pointed out that having intimate conversations over video chat is just the same as being with someone physically, and I know she engaged in that with him. She couldn't even estimate how many times she had done that with him. I then asked her how she envisions us possibly getting back together if she starts a discussion with me only to lie the very next moment. I told her that I would be checking her phone daily, and when I mentioned this, she argued that would not be trust, but rather treating me like garbage. Then, our son interrupted us, which led the conversation to a natural end. I wrapped it up by reminding her that it wasn't just me she cheated on, she also cheated on our 2 little boys, and that's something that broke her. She started yelling, telling me that I shouldn't talk about this in front of our kids anymore. Ironically, her sister told me how my wife is suffering and crying every day due to all this. It's as if she plays a part, crying in front of family while continuing to lie to me. She even mentioned that if she wanted to, she could still be with the other person and that her family couldn't do anything to stop her, almost as if I should be grateful that she ended things with him and that she's now in control of her choices. It just felt ridiculous at that point. I'm just venting and keeping you updated on everything. I appreciate all the support I've been given. I will remain strong and work through this complicated situation. It's clear this isn't going to end well for my boys, and I fear they may need psychological help. The older one has been showing signs of nervousness recently, but I will always be there for them. In an update, our attorneys finally reached an agreement, and the divorce will happen soon. She is taking the unfinished house along with the mortgage, which adds another layer to this already complex situation. She is now solely responsible for the unfinished house, and the mortgage is entirely in her name. The house, as it stands, is meant for the kids, and I want to make it clear that I have no intention of selling it out of any sense of revenge towards her or THA. I also do not want to live in her small hometown, located an hour away from the capital city where I currently reside. However, I will be taking back the amount of money that I have invested in the house, and that amount is actually quite reasonable. The child support arrangement we established is fair as well. We agreed that she would drop the kids off at my place in the capital city every other weekend, which means I will need to drive them back afterward. As it stands, I see my kids almost every weekend, but that still feels like it isn't enough for me. The pain of not being with them daily is overwhelming at times. I simply cannot accept a scenario where my 1-year-old and 3-year-old boys grow up without their father, especially because of a woman who cannot control her actions. I wish I could have them with me full time, but the legal system in Poland makes that nearly impossible. This may mean I have to adjust my routine and start driving to her town in the middle of the week just to stay involved in their lives. Regarding her, she continues to message me, expressing her love and wishing she could rewind time. She claims she suffers daily due to her past decisions. It has reached a point where she has even told me that she no longer sees checking her phone as mistreatment. She has allowed me to do it anytime. She has suggested that we move from her small town to the capital city if I take her back. She has agreed to share every detail of her affair if I choose to let her back into my life. Recently, she even visited my parents to apologize, which indicates that something has clearly changed in her perspective. Someone must have told her something that led her to this point, because she is now willing to do whatever it takes to make things right and has shown remorse. In her last message, she thanked me for not selling the house and for ending our relationship on amicable terms. She acknowledged that agreeing to those terms also means accepting the divorce, which I will have to agree to in court. However, I want to be clear that this does not reflect my true wishes. I do not want this divorce, and I still love her deeply. I understand that she may not believe my feelings, but I want her to know that I hope to have a chance to demonstrate my love for her one day. She expressed regret in a way that is profound and difficult to articulate. While I cannot deny that her words have an impact on me, they make the healing process even more challenging. The thought of my boys growing up in the capital city instead of that small town is really appealing. I genuinely believe she struggles being alone with 2 young children, but her actions have consequences. She cheated and destroyed what we had. I hope that time would help heal the wounds, but the process is painfully slow. Despite everything, I plan to stick to my decision and see this through to the end. I intend to provide an update one day when I finally reach a place of happiness. I'm left wondering whether my wife is genuinely remorseful. It's interesting to note that she only offered to share the details of her infidelity if I come back to her. It wasn't something she was willing to discuss right away. It took 3 months for her to show any signs of remorse. When she does apologize, she's not calling or visiting. Instead, she opts for messaging. Her family seems to be entirely on her side now, with her mother calling me a narcissist and her sister accusing me of trying to profit from the divorce and abandon a woman with 2 small children. Just yesterday, I spent a short time with my kids, and she suggested that I could stay the night, but of course, I declined. I would appreciate some insight into this situation. Since D-Day on April 7th, after nearly half a year, I find myself stuck in this complex dilemma where I keep asking myself the same questions over and over. Questions like, do I still love her? Could I return to her just for the sake of the kids? Do I want to move back to her small town and finish building the house? In 5 to 10 years, would I feel comfortable knowing the things she has done? The answer to all of these questions is a firm no, without hesitation. I undoubtedly love my kids immensely, but that's not enough to overlook everything else. I care deeply for my kids and wish I could see them every day. The love I feel for them is immense and irreplaceable. However, despite my feelings, I find myself in a situation where I cannot be with them as often as I would like. My desire to love their mother is equally strong, yet circumstances prevent me from fully embracing that love, even though she expresses a wish to rekindle our relationship. The longing to reunite as a family is overwhelming, but again, there are barriers that keep us apart. There was a moment when I offered her a second chance, suggesting that she move to the city where I live with our kids. The idea was to start fresh together and build a new life as a family. However, she rejected that proposal. She explained that she has family support in her small town and that she wouldn't sell their house because she wants our children to have something to inherit in the future. I tried to explain to her that family isn't just about a physical structure, like a house, it's about the love and connection between a mother, father, and children. This conversation led me to realize that there might not be a future for us as a couple. The lack of mutual agreement became apparent, and it felt like there was no middle ground we could find. I made it clear that I cannot continue living in the small town where everything began, the affair that changed everything. I reminded her how the past still looms over us, and I refused to build a house just a mile away from where her affair partner's family lives. The idea of living in constant worry that our paths might cross is unbearable. Although her affair partner lives abroad, he visits family a couple of times a year, which makes it even more difficult for me to stay in that town. I despise the small town, and she has made it clear that she has no interest in moving to the capital city. Our views on life have diverged drastically. In a moment of negotiation, we agreed that I would take back the money I invested in the house while she would keep it for our kids. However, she has now raised issues regarding our agreement. There's a clause that prevents her from selling the house until our children turn 18. She argues this is unfair since she plans to finish the house using her own finances. She worries that if the house is sold, I would receive half of a much more valuable property than the one we originally shared. When I asked her why she would even consider selling the house, she said that she cannot predict what her future will hold. This uncertainty has led me to distrust her intentions. My inclination now is to sell the house entirely, but doing so weighs heavily on my conscience since it was intended for our kids. Recently, she sent me a message asking if I could answer a question regarding our relationship. She suggested that if we talked in person, we would only end up shouting at each other. She acknowledged all the hurtful things that have been said and wanted to know if I could forgive her and consider starting anew as a family. This left me feeling conflicted. I doubt her sincerity in asking for forgiveness and wonder if she might be involved with someone else, which could be prompting her to clarify our situation. I told her that I am worth more than just a text conversation, and that we would talk soon. When we did talk, I laid out 2 conditions that I felt were essential for our marriage to continue: first, moving to the capital city, and second, cutting all ties with her affair partner and his family. She understood the second condition but found the first to be an insurmountable obstacle. While she expresses remorse for her actions, she is adamant about not wanting to move to Warsaw. She believes a beautiful and spacious home is unattainable there, and that even a modest apartment would be significantly more expensive to rent. She pointed out that our kids have a good life in the small town, where she only pays for the bills in her father's building. In Warsaw, her costs would multiply, and she wouldn't have the same support system of friends and family to rely on after work. While she acknowledges that the kids are happy and that this setup is convenient for her, she insinuates that moving would only serve to benefit me. She argues that it would merely be satisfying my ego. This ongoing disagreement highlights the chasm that now separates us, leaving me to grapple with my feelings and what the future holds for our family. It feels like a tough spot to be in, and it kind of feeds into my ego just a little. The situation is complicated because she has a point. Even the kindergarten in our small town is run by her sister, and we hardly pay anything for it. This really puts me in a jam that feels impossible to fix. I have to stand firm on my choice. I won't live in that small town. I get how it doesn't make sense for them to pack up and move, though. So, we came to an agreement that I'll keep visiting and spend as much time with the kids as possible. I plan to take them to Warsaw every other weekend, just like before. She mentioned that she won't date anyone else and will be waiting for me, saying that I'll see in time that she intends to stay single. Honestly, I find that hard to believe, and at this point, I don't care much. It might actually be better for the kids if I'm the only father figure in their lives, instead of some random guy I don't even know. During our talk, she said a few things that made it clear she feels no remorse. When I asked why she hadn't bothered to call me during our separation and only sent texts, she claimed she was too busy with 2 kids running around. She also said she will never talk about the affair again and won't share any more details if I ask. She feels done with that chapter. This all came up because I mentioned some things to her family that she wanted to keep quiet. She then revealed that the other guy had been messaging her for years, but she always turned him down. However, she claimed that my behavior made her decide to start an affair with him last year. I told her that what she said was just disgusting. Her response was to roll her eyes and say I was just feeling sorry for myself. Now, I've somehow learned to live alone with limited time with my kids, but feeling like she's dating again is tough. A while ago, I started using dating apps, and I've managed to get a decent amount of matches. Setting up a date with a nice girl hasn't been an issue. I've even had 2 or 3 short relationships, but they didn't last long. Each time they wanted to meet, I was busy with the kids, especially since every other weekend is completely off limits for me. I always came up with excuses about meetings or something similar, and they took it as a sign that I wasn't really interested. The real challenge now is figuring out how to navigate all this. Whenever I meet someone new, I don't mention that I'm almost divorced and have 2 kids. I found that this is the best way for a second or third date to happen. I'm curious if there's any solution to this or if it's possible for a girl to stick around if I tell the truth from the start. Has anyone else gone through something like this? Right now, I don't feel ready for a serious relationship, but eventually, I'd like to be in one.